Good morning. To begin with, I would like to thank the organizers of the colloquium and especially Dr. Martina Yurikova, who allowed us to contribute in this very interesting conference, whose theme is literature and visual arts. My talk, which is entitled From Theatre to Painting, the Illustration of Shakespearean Plays, is divided into two parts. In the first part, I will deal with some aspects dealing with the relationship between literature and the other arts. In the same part, I will also concentrate on the relationship or on the fascination of painters with Shakespearean plays. In the second part, I shall concentrate or I shall show some slides representing the painter's fascination with Shakespearean plays. So the theme of my talk stems from my teaching experience in the English department at the University of Annaba and my deep interest in literature and the arts. I have taught Shakespearean plays to four-year BA students in English studies for several years. In 2009, with the introduction of the LMD system in my university at the beginning of the master's degree in literature and civilization, I was led to take in charge the teaching of a module entitled Literature and the Other Arts, now called Interdisciplinary Approaches to Literature. Hence, this talk is about a kind of meeting between my teaching of literature and my focus on the arts, more specifically on Shakespeare and painting. Another academic experience, my teaching assignment of comparative literature, has also given me a deep insight into the relationship between literature and the other arts. At the beginning of chapter 7, entitled The Mutual Elimination of the Arts, Ulrich Weinstein, in his Comparative Literature and Literary Theory, states, quote, "A question of great concern to the theorist of comparative literature is that of the relationship of literature to the other arts, chiefly music and painting." Such a statement echoes H. Remak, who considers the comparative study of the arts as a branch of comparative literature. Indeed, his definition of comparative literature includes, quote, "the study of the relationships between literature on the one hand and other areas of knowledge and belief, such as the arts, on the other," unquote. While H. Remak's statement is more concerned with the problems of definition of comparative literature, it also advocates a kind of interdisciplinary approach in the study of literature. Many interdisciplinary studies involving literature and other areas of knowledge have emerged lately in academia. Example, narrative medicine, philosophy and literature, film and literature, etc. However, literature and the arts are characterized by a great proximity. For example, as has been suggested, quote, "comparative literature accepts the fact that all the fine arts are similar activities despite their different media and technique, and that there are only parallels between them induced by the general spirit of differing eras, but that there are frequently direct influences of one art on another. Unquote. When dealing with the relationship with literature and the other arts, many scholars tend to give a privileged position to literature, or to stress mostly the influence of literature on other artistic fields. Remarque, for example, is, and quote, of the opinion that the comparative study of the arts constitutes a branch of comparative literature as long as literature is used as the point of departure or the focal point of the investigation, unquote. Likewise, in his discussion of the relationship between film and literature, although he highlights many similarities between the two disciplines, John Bidega concludes by stating, quote, by and large, therefore, film is considered as a branch of literature. Filmmakers are indeed indebted to literature in a wide variety of ways. However, Bidega fails to point out, for example, that many writers have been inspired by the development of cinematic techniques. Truman Capote, who made his reputation with the use of such techniques in his famous novel In Cold Blood, is a case in point. Many films have also made the fame and reputation of novels they were based on. In this talk, I'm concerned with how painters were fascinated by Shakespeare's plays, but it is worth pointing out that in his book, How Paintings Influenced Shakespeare, Stuart Sellars offers a new way of looking at Shakespeare's plays. My argument here is to suggest that if literature influences the art, artists also have a great impact on literature. In his discussion of the relationship between literature and the other arts, Ulrich Weinstein also pointed out that the manifestations of this relationship can be seen chiefly in the connection of literature with music and painting. Shakespeare is an illustrative example. Being the focus of my paper, Shakespearean plays and painting will be discussed at length. However, I would like to mention, though briefly, that Shakespeare's plays and the reputation of the bard have also attracted famous composers. Tchaikovsky is a case in point. Tchaikovsky enjoyed a wide cultural knowledge. He was a passionate reader and theater goer. Shakespeare's reputation in Russia reached a peak in the first half of the 19th century, especially after the staging of Hamlet in Moscow in 1837, and the wide acclaimed performance of the great actor Pavel Molotov. Tchaikovsky attended many performances of Shakespeare's plays in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and abroad. He became increasingly fascinated by the bard, whose influence can be easily traced in his symphonic achievements. Tchaikovsky's first involvement with Shakespeare's plays occurred when one of his closest friends, Balakirev, suggested to him to set up the theme of Romeo and Juliet into an orchestral piece. Tchaikovsky was very enthusiastic and immediately started to tackle his project. It seems that this was a harrowing experience, for it is only after 11 years of the premiere of the first that the familiar version was achieved. In 1873, Tchaikovsky wrote an orchestral piece based on the theme of Hamlet. The play, which had a good reputation in Russia, and the character of the Prince of Denmark had a special resonance among Russians. In 1876, the character in 1876, although he turned down a suggestion to tackle the Merchant of Venice, he managed to write an opera out of Othello. Shakespeare's reputation as a dramatist today is undeniable, but after his death in 1616, it took time for that reputation to become established. Artists who began to engage with Shakespeare's plays timidly have increasingly contributed to the establishment of such a reputation, especially after the outstanding performance of a few actors. Indeed, thanks to his skill and brilliance when acting as Richard III and King Lear, David Garrick, for example, inspired such painters as William Hogarth, Benjamin Wilson, and Robert H. Pine, who exhibited works based on Shakespearean subjects. Two other prominent painters contributed a great deal in the promotion of Shakespeare. They are Henry Fuseli and Benjamin West. The former came from Zurich and settled in London in 1779. He devised several illustrations and paintings inspired by Hamlet, Macbeth, and King Lear. The latter, Benjamin West, came from colonial America, more precisely from Pennsylvania. West became historical painter to the king in 1772. His famous paintings centered on Shakespeare's King Lear. William Blake and John Mortimer and John Hamilton Mortimer, who are considered as artists outside the mainstream, were also attracted by some of Shakespeare's masterpieces. Shakespeare's fame reached a new dimension at the end of the 19th century when the Shakespeare Gallery was launched in 1786 by John Boydell. Shakespeare also enjoyed a good reputation abroad, in Germany, France, and in America. In France, it was not until the beginning of the Romantic period that such painters as Eugène Delacroix and Alexandre-Marie Collin painted scenes from Shakespeare's plays. At any rate, as Richard Altick in his book Paintings from Books suggests, pictures from Shakespeare accounted for about 1/5, some 2,300 of the total number of literary paintings recorded between 1760 and 1900, and those are just the paintings by British artists. I will move to the second part of my talk, and here I will concentrate on some paintings representing scenes from Shakespeare's plays. I will start with the death of Ophelia in a minute. But as an introduction, I will say almost all Shakespeare's plays have been the subject of paintings. However, Hamlet is one of the plays that was mostly scrutinized by artists. Characters such as Hamlet, the ghost of his father, Ophelia, and Queen Gertrude, as well as outstanding scenes from the play, have attracted several painters. For the purpose of my discussion, I will concentrate on two examples that are often the focus of painterly representations of scenes from Hamlet. These are the death of Ophelia in Act 4, Scene 8, and the play within the play, or the murder of Gonzago in Act 3, Scene 3. In Shakespeare's plays, the death of Ophelia occurs off stage. Neither the reader nor the spectator is brought directly with the happenings of such a tragic event. Ophelia's death is reported by Queen Gertrude, Hamlet's mother, who announces in Act 4, Scene 8, to King Claudius and Laertes, Ophelia's brother, that Ophelia had drowned. It is worth noting that Queen Gertrude reports the event without being a witness of it. This is extremely unusual in narrative paintings, in trying to depict events which are left to the imagination of the play's audience. In this case, it has brought several outstanding works of arts. When dealing with the paintings I will show in a minute, I will concentrate on the paintings by among the illustrations showing the death of Ophelia, which will be dealt with here, are two famous paintings, one by Eugène Delacroix and the other by John Everett Millet. The first one is the death of Ophelia by Eugène Delacroix. It was painted in 1838. In Delacroix's depiction of Ophelia, there appeared the first real events of sexuality and erotism. Delacroix's depiction of Ophelia is close to Queen Gertrude's account of the maid's drowning. The second picture represents the second painting by Eugène Delacroix. Indeed, 15 years, that is in 1863, Delacroix returned to the story and painted the death of Ophelia again. Although the artist has reversed, as you can see, the image here, he's still holding, or Ophelia is still holding onto the branch of a tree and about to be carried away to her death. On the same subject, again, we have a picture representing a painting by John Everett Millet, and the painting again represents the death of Ophelia. Millet's extreme detail and very precise brush strokes allow for greater photorealism in his paintings than in those of most of his contemporaries. The vivid color also seems celebratory, with Ophelia's surroundings appearing either ignorant of her death or unfeeling towards her. The darkness in this painting comes from the black water, which seems to be swallowing her, as well as dragging the colorful flowers out of her hands. Millet shows us a bright color drawn away from her as she is consumed by this darkness. I would like to mention that the lines I have read, the comments I have read just now concerning this painting of John Everett Mee are by Rachel Stewart in his Ophelia in 19th Century English Art. From the death of Ophelia, I'm going to move to another famous scene in Hamlet, and this scene occurs in Act 3, Scene 2. The scene is often referred to by critics as the play scene, or the scene, or the play within the play, or again, the mouse trap. The scene, as I said, which occurs in Act 3, Scene 2. In this scene, we have, after Hamlet meets a troupe of players who came to visit Elsinore, he starts doubting the ghost and wants to make sure that his uncle is the murderer of his father before avenging. He decides to stage a play before his uncle in order to prove him guilty. The play enacts the circumstances of his father's murder. This is the play scene, or the play within the play. It occurs in Act 3, Scene 2, and constitutes the climax of Hamlet. One of the most important paintings depicting this scene is Edward Augustine Abbey, which you see in front of you. Edwin, the painting was first exhibited at the Royal Academy, and as has been suggested, it was accompanied in the exhibition catalogue by the following lines when Hamlet instructs Horatio to watch Claudius carefully. The lines read as follows: Give him heedful note, for mine eyes will rivet to his face, and after we will both our judgment join in censure of his seeming. What is important about this painting is that Edwin Austin Abbey places in the center of the painting the main characters, who are Hamlet and King Claudius. This is important because here the focus is on the reactions of King Claudius, and Hamlet tries to observe King Claudius's reaction. So Edwin Abbey places them in the center of the painting and puts the play within the play, completely outside the frame and in the viewer's space. Now everyone looks out from the painting at us and the space occupied by the mouse trap play, so that we can see and accurately judge the characters' reactions. In a scene where facial expressions and physical reactions are so important, Abbey's solution is masterful. The second painting of the same scene again is by Daniel Maclise. It was painted in 1842. Unlike Edwin Edwin Austin Abbey. In his 1842 painting, Maclise made the play of Gonzago the main focus of his composition, putting it in the center of the canvas with Hamlet, Ophelia, and Horatio on the left side and Gertrude and Claudius on the right. After the discussion of representations from Hamlet, I will concentrate on Shakespeare's Macbeth. As is the case with Hamlet, Shakespeare's Macbeth again was or attracted many painters. For instance, the picture in front of you is by Alexander Mary Collins, and it's entitled "The Three Witches." The Three Witches, and in this painting of the witches appear at the beginning of the play. They set up and determine the action of the play. They also foreshadow its tragic mood. Alexander Mary Collins is a French painter who, like Eugène Delacroix, belonged to the Romantic period and was a great admirer of Shakespeare's plays. Collins was acquainted with the works of English painters and was certainly influenced by Henry Fuseli's painting on the same subject. Indeed, Henry Fuseli had also painted or has a painting entitled The Weed Sisters, which he produced in 1783. Another painting by Henry Fuseli from Shakespeare's play Macbeth is the meeting of Macbeth and Banquo with the three witches on a heath. What strikes, or as in his Shakespeare's Macbeth, Anthony shared on art historical depictions, writes or comments as follows: what strikes me is how Fuseli's composition captures the essence of the witches' dreadful prophecies. The sloping hoods along the upper of the image, the outstretched arms along the lower, these both dealing to a tapering perspective of aimed fingers in the front, witch's digit providing the sharp tip and creating a kind of arrow, an arrow of evil as I see it. This is the only direction Macbeth can take, and it will lead to terrible violence and destruction, his own included. Of course, this is between quotes. It is the comment, as I said, of Anthony Sher. The following representation is a picture by John Singer Sargent. I think this is a very, very interesting picture, or a picture of a painting, because it shows Lady Macbeth, the famous character of the play. And what is interesting again here is that we have the character of Lady Macbeth performed by the well-known Helen Terry. What we can say about this painting, again, Sargent's painting catches the spirit and nature of Lady Macbeth. Macbeth's wife is ambitious and longs for power. As soon as she learns about the witch's prophecy to Macbeth, "All hail Macbeth, thou shalt be king hereafter," her desire to become queen is triggered. This is clearly shown in the picture when she holds the crown above her head. Ellen Terry's performance as Lady Macbeth and Sargent's painting heightened the power of the character. Right. The following, again, picture represents a lady, or is entitled Lady Macbeth Receives the Daggers. And this painting, again, is by the painter Henry Fuseli, who made a lot of paintings based on Shakespeare's plays, and especially Macbeth. This picture, which shows Macbeth and Lady Macbeth again, in this scene, Lady Macbeth, in this scene, or in Act 2, Scene 1, Lady Macbeth instructs or addresses Macbeth and says, "Infirm of purpose, give me the daggers. The sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. 'Tis the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil. If do bleed, I'll gild the faces of the grooms withal, for it must seem their guilt." In this picture, Macbeth has accomplished the deed, the murder of King Duncan. He loses control of himself and is filled with fear and distress. After the deed, he leaves the murder scene with the daggers. Lady Macbeth is mad at him and instructs him to return the daggers back in the king's room. He is afraid and refuses to obey. In the picture, Fuseli also catches the essence of the scene. Fear, remorse, and loss of self-control characterize Macbeth. Lady Macbeth rages at his weakness and his childish behavior. She decides to take the daggers back and prevent the discovery of their evil deed. Her words reflect power, strength, and control of the situation. I have taken examples from two Shakespearean plays, two tragedies of Shakespeare. Hamlet. These are Hamlet and Macbeth. There are also many other paintings based on Shakespeare's plays by other painters. This shows again that there were many painters who were attracted to Shakespearean plays. As a conclusion, I'm not going to give a long conclusion, but I'm going to give two quotations just to show the strong relationship between literature and the visual arts, and mainly to illustrate the theme of my topic again, which is Shakespeare and painting. The first quote runs as follows, inverted commas: paintings give us the opportunity to linger over these details, to be struck anew by the tragedy of Ophelia's death, or to consider the despair of King Lear, abandoned with only his fool in a storm. Artists shape the way we think of key scenes. This quote, unquote, this quote is by Molly Trezaden. The following quotation is by Kessler Svensson, who maintains that the history of a great literary work is incomplete if it does not include the interpretations put upon the masterpiece by artists. I have chosen these two quotations just to show again the influence of literature on painters. We have seen, for instance, that many paintings are based on Shakespeare's plays. But the quotations also show that artists can, as it were, influence literary works. I have mentioned before that, for instance, the title of this book, which is entitled "How Paintings Influence Shakespeare" by Stuart Sellers. It would be interesting, perhaps, to look closely at this idea, or to look closely at this book entitled "How Paintings Influence Shakespeare," and to see how or in what way Shakespeare was influenced by paintings. Thank you very much for your attention.